Okay, so that was Toby, and he was talking about why React Native is probably the best out there. Next up, we have Vinay Sharma. Vinay Sharma is a resident software engineer at GeekyAnts, and he will be talking about handling complex animations in React Native. So we'll have Vinay Sharma join the stream.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi,
Vinay. Can
Digvijay.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm audible?
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, yes, you are. Welcome to the React Native remote meetup.
Yeah, thank you very much. So,
Before
hi,
we
everybody.
Yeah, before we begin, a small introduction for Vinay. He is by profession a software engineer and he works with us at GeekyAnts. But in his free time, he loves to cook a lot. And he is also a music producer and a DJ in his free time.
Yeah,
So,
so I think Digvijay has completely completed all my lines that I had to say. Yeah. So, this in the quarantine, I've been cooking a lot. So, I've been cooking a lot of things, and I love producing music. And yeah, so it's really interesting to be present over here. And again, thank you very much, Digvijay, for presenting this amazing, organizing this amazing reactive meetup today.
thank you. Thank you. So, Vinay,
Yeah,
I'll let all the viewers listen to what you have to say. All the
sure.
best and take it away.
So, hi everybody. Today we're going to talk about something really interesting in React Native. Like it's going to be about how can we actually handle the how to handle complex animations at React Native. So there are some points that we're going to look at. So why animations at first place are really required in any application that we build. Second, we are going to look at the challenges that we face as a developer. And then we are going to look at a really cool demonstration. So looking at the points like why React Native is required. So it enhances the user experience of our application at very first go. It makes our application really immersive and it makes it really interesting to use our application. It increases our user engagement because no one really likes to use any application which doesn't seem to have any animation these days, and it attracts attention to important elements and functions in our application. So if we have really small elements, like they are really minuscule in nature, so with animation we can actually show to our user like how they really function, and we can help identify connections between various components in our views which animate, and it will help us give a feedback to the user like whatever the action they're performing in our application. Like if we don't really have any kind of animation, it becomes really difficult for the user to interpret what's happening in our app. Now coming on to the challenges, so animations are quite overwhelming at first. So let's suppose any designer shows you any animation that you want to do, so looking at very having a first glance at it, it looks like really impossible to do. It's so over time the animation get really complex and it gets difficult to maintain 60 fps, where we have to then make a decision where, I feel like it shouldn't really be a decision. Like we should always opt for running our animations on native thread and running our business logic on the javascript thread so that there are not really any kind of frame drops. So, and then we have to support the devices of all dimensions. So just like we have to keep the layout responsive for all the dimensions of the devices, we also need to make sure like the animations are working properly and there are not really any kind of glitches, no matter what kind of device we're using. And again, so we have a phobia of learning a new API. So that's something I've personally faced. So it was about the React Native's animated API. So a little glance of it, how does it really work? So you can import it from React Native and it gives you an animated value with a constructor where you can supply the initial value which you want to set to it. And once you have that value, you can animate it using the animated API, where you specify the value to which it should animate. You can even specify the delay. So for example, here I've set 500 milliseconds. Then we have duration. So you want to specify for how many seconds this animation should work. And then you need to specify if you want to use the native driver or not. If you set it to true, the entire animation would work on native thread without blocking anything in your JavaScript thread. And then React Native also provides you an animated view in which you can provide the styling for your opacity, which is animated being here. Coming on to the next, let's suppose that we want to run parallel animations. And over here, we can animate two things like opacity and translate Y. And again, animated is imported from React Native. Opacity and translate Y are two things that we are going to animate in parallel. So then we can wrap the entire animations with the parallel animation provided by React Native, in which we can specify all the animations that we want to animate, such as opacity, translate Y, and then we can another again have our view over here that we want to animate. It goes like this way. After that, let's suppose that we want to animate our animations in a sequence. So over here, we have the same animated values. So we are going to wrap our animations with the sequence. Over here, let's suppose that we want to run the opacity first. So we specify opacity, and then we have the delay. So let's suppose that I want to fade in my view, and then I want to delay for 1 second. So it will delay for a second or so. And then let's suppose that we want to translate this downward. So we can just write it in over there. And again, we have animated view that we can use for the animations. So now we are going to look at the demonstration. So this demonstration is more like a custom navigation, which will handle the animation when we transition from one screen to another screen. And it's this problem is basically known as shared element transition, where in React Native it feels like an element is being shared between two different screens. So this is what animation looks like. So this is the splash screen where you can see like the image translates upwards and then zooms in to the home screen. And it makes it feel like as if this image is common to both the home screen as well as splash screen. So the best thing of this animation is like this is entirely built on the native thread. So that means you don't really have any frame drops. You won't really have any performance issues on the animation side. So I guess let's just jump straight into how does it really work. We're going to first look at how is the splash screen actually structured. So over here, I'm not using safe area view. First of all, I'm gonna tell why in the later on. So I'm using the React Native safe area, which provides us this padding from the top and the bottom. If we have any phone with any notch assets, we get to know what is the required padding for the safe areas. And then as you see, as you just saw in the previous slide, the splash images were totally random. So I'm just generating the random splash images using this map function, which will give me a image uh, from across all these splash images that I have. So this is the container that I'm using. So over here, this is the only out event, which is used by the view. So why this is required is like I need to calculate like what is the exact distance this image should translate upward. So actually this image is positioned over here using justify containing same align item center. So I don't really know what is the distance that it should really translate from here. So how I'm going to calculate this view is going to provide whatever its height is, and then we are going to calculate whatever the height is between these white portions. So we can get it by subtracting the height of the image by the image of the view and dividing it by 2. So using this, we get the height of the container over here, which we need to translate it upwards. And then we need to subtract the height of the header. And then we need to subtract the padding from the top. Now, the reason why I didn't use safe area view was like there was some problem and the only out event was getting called twice. So in order to avoid that, I use this padding top and bottom, which is provided by React Native safe area. And then coming on to the structure over here, we have the splash screen header, which over here you can see it says a shade element transition. And then we have the header, which is related to the home screen, and it says React Native Meet 2020, which you will see in the home screen. So actually, React Native doesn't really provide any way to share the elements between two screens. So I've actually used the same view common to both the home screen as well as splash screen. And there comes the animated image. So whatever the image that was calculated earlier, it was the random image. I've supplied at the source, and this is the styling for it. And we are going to translate it upwards using this transform property. Later on, we look at the splash screen breakdown. So it's just nothing much complex. We are going to run two animations in parallel. First, we are going to fade in the home header, which is over here at the top, you can see. And then we have another animation which will help us translate this image to the top. Once that is done, we are going to navigate to the home screen and passing the splash image that is random to the home screen so that we keep track of how the which splash image is used. You can even keep this logic in Redux if you want to maintain the common splash images across both the splash and home screen. So component of the home image structure. So it feels like image is zooming in, but that's not the case over here because image manipulation is really expensive and it can really affect the performance of the application. Whenever you're trying to manipulate an image, there are definitely chances of frame drops. So how I actually maintained is like we have this image, and then you can also see like there will be some borders on the top and bottom. So they are actually not borders; they are views with the width of just 1 pixel, and it just feels like as if the borders are being animated. And then there are basically actually these pseudo borders that I've used, and what they do is like they translate in the opposite direction, so as if to make it feel like the image is zooming in. So how does it look like? So I've actually calculated the width of each of these views by subtracting the width of the image with the device width and dividing it by 2, which equally distributes the dimension for these. And these are actually the animated views which are going to move. This one is going to move to the left side, this one is going to the right side, and which will make it feel like as if our image is zooming in. And this is our right border. So once we have done with the home image structure, this is what the image will feel like. So these appear, and then they just translate to their respective directions, and it just totally feels like as if my image has totally zoomed in. So here is the animation that I'm using. So opacity. So it is being used for the borders that you can see over here. Like there are really slim borders at the top and the bottom, the black colored borders, and this is going to translate my left sided pseudo border, and this is going to translate and animate my right sided border to make it feel like as if the image is being zoomed in. So once that is done, the entire animations are done. I'm just conditionally rendering these side borders. So I just set it to false, which makes it unmount from our react native view. And after that, second breakdown would be like I've added a white colored overlay so that the text becomes more visible over here. So just like to increase the contrast between the image and the text. So I've just again absolutely positioned a view over here with the background color of white and some kind of an opacity. So this is the absolutely positioned view, and we have some animations which were already running in parallel, and then we have added a new animation which will animate the overlay opacity. Coming to this third breakdown, I'm going to actually zoom in and overlay, and then after that you can even see that like I'm increasing the blur of the image. So how does it really function? So actually, if you just try to animate the blur radius value by animated API, it will drop your frame rates. So in order to prevent that, what I've done is like I've added another image on top of this one, which is absolutely positioned, and its z index is probably less than the z index of all those borders which are at the left and right hand side. So what's happening is like I've given a blur radius to it. For some reason, Android tends to take more blur value if I set as 10. So I've just kept it as a ratio. Like for iOS, it's going to be 10, and for the Android, it's going to be 2. So what's happening is like I'm just fading it in. So this image is absolutely positioned on top of it, and instead of animating the blur radius, it just makes it feels like and actually I'm animating the blur of the image that was already being used. So coming out of the fourth breakdown, it's nothing much complex. I'm just using this view, which is again absolutely positioned on top of my image, which is just zooming in along with the splash image and fading it in. Over here, you can see like we have already used the opacity, which was being already used to animate this view. And now coming on to the home button structure. So it looks like as if we are drawing the borders of these buttons, but it's not really it's not really something that I'm doing over here. I'm not really actually animating the borders of the buttons. So first of all, let's look at the button structure over here. So over here, like you can see, like I have used Flex One for this entire view, and over there I am again using the on layout API, which will help me calculate whatever the height of this is. So why am I using it? Like this is actually a view of width 1. So what it's going to do is it's going to translate from upward to the down. So as if feel like I'm actually drawing the borders of this button. So once that is done, I calculate the height of that border. I set animate to true. So basically, it's a boolean check to start the animations only once we receive the height of this entire view, and then we set the value of translate y animated value. So this is basically a function which is provided by a React Native animated API to directly set the value of any animated value directly without animating it. So again, over here, we have this translate X. So basically this is the variable. This is the animated variable, which will help us translate this horizontal border. And initially its value is set to the device width. So it's going to, it's going to be initially over here, positioned somewhere around about here. And once we start the animation, it will just slide in from here over here. And that's the animated view over here. So I'm not really using any kind of margins or padding to provide to this button view. So if I provide any kind of margin on or padding, what will happen is this view, when it slides in from the left, it will be visible in this area. So to provide that, I've added this left border and this right border. So as if like to make the user feel like there's actually some padding over here, but whereas it's actually not. So coming on to this, over here we have the vertical border. Initially its value is set to 0, but once we get the native event working, we can actually calculate the value of whatever the height of this is. And we are later on going to set it to the height of this view. And later on, these are the buttons that are mapped over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, which are going to be present over here. And they're just simply going to fade in. And then we have this right border over here. So coming on to the breakdown of how these buttons actually animate. So that's how the actual thing is actually working on. So on the home screen, these are the borders that are zooming in the splash image, and this is the border which comes on from the top, and this one is the border which comes on from the left, which makes it feels like as if I'm actually animating the borders of my buttons. So this is what the animation looks like. I'm using an opacity to animate the opacity of all my buttons. And if animate is true, so like I said, I don't want to animate it before I get the height of this entire view from that native event. So once that is done, I'm going to run these animations in parallel. Opacity, okay, opacity, which will help me which will help me fade in the buttons. And then we have translate y, which will help me translate this particular view from the top and the bottom. And at the end, we have translate x, which will help me translate from left to right. So this was the home button breakdown for the entire animation. And over here, you can see like there's another like footer. So as to just fill up the space, I'm just translating it from the top to the bottom, from bottom to the top. So the ultimate goal was no frame drops, achieve butter smooth 60 FPS animations. So in order to test it, you can just run this piece of code, and this will entirely block the JavaScript thread, and still you can see the animations are running at butter smooth. And to make the animation totally responsive, this is the video of iPhone 8. So over here you can see 60 FPS animation and responsive app design. So let's have any questions if you guys have.
Uh, Vinay, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Perfect, perfect. So we have a few questions from our viewers online. Israr
sure.
Sheikh wants you to share the repo link of this animation. So if you could do that post the event, that would be wonderful. Israr, you can follow Vinay on his Twitter account, and he will be able to share the GitHub repo there with you and
Okay,
everybody else.
so GitHub repo is definitely on the end slide where I'm going to thank for joining in with me. That's definitely present over there.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
Also, we have another question from Rajat, who wants to ask which is better to use, a React Native animated or the React Native animated API 2?
Um, can you just repeat that once again? Like React Native animated
Sure.
and React Native animated too.
So Rajat wants to know which API is better to use, React Native animated or React Native animated API 2?
I think uh, the latter one he's trying to say is React Native reanimated too. Can we just get some correction if he's trying to say that one? Because the only
Sure,
library that
we'll.
I'm aware of is React Native reanimated.
Okay. Okay. Another question that we have is by uh, just another gamer again. He asks, the native driver works differently for Android and iOS. What would your suggestions be to handle animations to be responsive on both platforms using use native driver?
So, like I was talking, to make the animations as much responsive as possible. Well, definitely, if native driver works differently on Android and iOS, I don't think it's something related to the responsiveness, because responsiveness is something like you have to, deal with the various dimensions of heights and width of the views that you're using. So my suggestion would be to definitely use Flexbox as much as possible. So my
Mm.
entire animations are totally, they're not using any hard coded values as such, except the splash image. So the height and width of that is set to the, zero point 0.7 times the height of the device height. And this is the only hard coded value that I'm using. Apart from that, for responsiveness, you can definitely use Flexbox.
Right. So Rajat just got back to us and he
Yeah.
corrected his question. So he does mean reanimate too. So which one do you
Yeah.
think is
So
better?
definitely React Native reanimated 2 is definitely better, because you don't really need to worry much about the native drivers as such. I guess it works on native itself, but the thing is, like, even I was like thinking about presenting about that as well, because but I have seen like they haven't really posted much about the documentations as such about React Native reanimated 2. But definitely once their documentation is totally upright, I'll prefer to use React Native reanimated too. It's way much better than animated API.
Right. Rajat, I hope that answers your question. We have time for one more question, which is
Sure.
by Rajan Preet Singh. He asks, how reliable is animated view for 90 FPS?
Okay, so that's something I've not really tried on, because most of the mobile devices that we have currently are 60 FPS, and there are only few devices which can go north of 90 hertz or 120 FPS. Like I guess OnePlus has and Samsung S20 has. So I'm not really sure if animated view would be able to handle 90 FPS, but I'm definitely sure about 60 FPS.
Right. Wonderful. So
Yeah.
Vinay, I'll let you quickly close up your presentation, share the GitHub link, and wrap it up as you like.
All right. So thank you very much. That's my GitHub repository. You can definitely check it out, clone it, experiment with it, and let me know if there's any errors or bugs in it. All right. Thank you very much.